Hey everyone, I'm going to talk all about OCD in pregnancy, the fear of never having a baby, the fear of something going wrong when you do have a baby, all the health-related fears that can be combined with that, the fear of harm, loss of control, and just basically responsibility OCD, which is a huge one, and missing out in life, especially if you live in certain areas of the world where having a family, the societal beliefs is really strong about that. Maybe you're in a really religious community, et cetera, et cetera. Before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below. Everyone knows I like to go through all the comments and respond back to people. I think it's very important to be active in the OCD community and anxiety community in general. And if you're interested in and or suffering with any of these fears, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com. Again, that is info@ocdrecovery.com. And I'll be using the book in this video as well, like I like to do, and I'm breaking down some of these practical examples. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fear of not having a baby and or something going wrong, whether it's an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage, et cetera, or maybe you're dating someone who's sterile and they can't have kids, and then you have all the other fears about, and I'm no expert in this area, but going and doing whatever you have to do to get a baby from someone else and using someone else's sperm. The name of that is leaving my mind right now, but it will come to me probably in the middle of the video. That's how ADHD works. So those fears are based around the fear of not being able to be a mother and or the fears of not having the life you want, which is basically all fear. Now, it's important to highlight that a lot of these and everything we're going to talk about is fear of losing control, fear, which is not having the life you want and all the what ifs, and really the fear of being a bad person, if there's harm-related fears, which is really common, postpartum depression type fears, which we don't know 100%, but that type of depression can be much more caused by actual hormone-related issues than, say, depression caused by OCD, which could be much more belief system. My life shouldn't be this way. It's really difficult, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know for sure. You'll never be able to know for sure, but there's probably a much more hormone-related issue when it comes to postpartum depression, but there's still beliefs present. And even if you can't change something in the moment, the principles of unconditional self-life, other acceptance still apply. So when it comes to all of the compulsions that might be present when it comes to the fear of not being able to have a baby, you might be looking at Google stuff. You might be reassuring yourself to other people, saying self-reassuring mantra statements, venting to your partner. Oh my gosh, it's so terrible. If I don't have a baby, this would be the worst thing ever. I can't stand it, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at this particular fear, okay, well, the fear of missing out in life, the fear component of it, this is what it will look like. Okay. So the activating event, remember, as I always say in all my videos, especially the educational-based videos where I'm teaching you how to break down beliefs, it's A, activating event, equals C, is how most people think. So they think if someone cuts you off on the road, that person made me angry. Yes, they played a part, but your belief systems are primarily the driver of the long-term chronic emotional disturbance. So what am I most disturbed about? Not having a baby, the fear of not having a baby. Then the beliefs, okay, the irrational beliefs. So it's really A plus B equals C. And it is important to say that the activating event does matter. And sometimes it matters a lot more than other people. I always like to say if someone comes back from war and they see some really tragic things and they've committed some really unfortunate acts, telling them that the activating event doesn't matter would not be a good idea. Let's put it to you that way. And we could talk about that in further videos, and I break down the PTSD components of stuff because I've been getting a lot of questions on that, and we do work with a lot of people who have that comorbidity as well. So the belief is, it would be absolutely terrible if I can't have children. I must have children because I want to be a mother. Therefore, it needs to happen. I can't stand the possibility of never having children. Life is not worth living if I can't have children. And that's where the depression can come in, feeling of overall sadness, over concern, maybe even anger and resentment towards yourself and or potentially your partner if they're sterile and stuff like that. And then that equals C, which is your unhealthy negative emotions and your maladaptive unhelpful behaviors. So you have anxiety and shame, embarrassment, severe guilt towards yourself, depression or depressed mood, problematic jealousy and envy of your friends that have children, and just overall things that cause chronicity of problematic emotions. And then your maladaptive behaviors could be compulsively trying to have intimacy to prove, no, I can't have a baby, and or compulsively Googling about how to have other people's sperm, etc., not taking care of yourself, your hygiene, depression, you're not going to work, you're not hanging out with family because you're really depressed because you can't have the family you want. And then what you have to do is you have to come over to disputing. And these are the questions that are really important. Where is holding this belief getting me? Is it helpful or is it getting me into trouble? Well, this belief is obviously getting you into trouble because you're on here watching this video. It's obviously causing a plethora of shame, guilt, anxiety, panic attacks. Is it really awful? Now, I know this is really difficult for you mothers that value motherhood, which I can't relate to you on that, but I can relate to you on the OCD component of how these fears latch because they go for the things that you value the most. So is it really horrible? Well, it can't be 100% horrible because there's many people out there who don't have children and they're not chronically depressed or anxious, like my wife. My wife doesn't have children. We don't have children. That might change one day, but she's not chronically anxious or depressed about it. And then people go down the rabbit hole and they say, well, she doesn't have OCD. Well, it doesn't really matter because there's a lot of people out there who don't have OCD or anxiety-based disorders. They might just have temporary neurosis, and that person is extremely anxious and or depressed because they can't have children. So the belief is the driving factor, whether you have OCD or not. That's important to say. Can you really not stand it? This one's always my favorite one because we say this, right? I can't stand it. You're in line getting a coffee. I can't stand waiting in this line. Then the coffee comes out and you stood waiting in line. So it is a comical aspect. Would life be totally not worth living if I can't have children? It would be really difficult. Remember, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. We have to learn to create the space between the two of accepting our worst case scenario, of not having children, and also saying, I really dislike this. I'm going to do what I can to have children in a balanced way. But if for some reason I don't have children, I can find other things in life to find joy from, and many people have done this. And then that leads you to your effective, rational new philosophies, which would be, I would want to have children. They mean a lot to me, but I don't have to have children in order to survive. It may be bad or unfortunate, but it's not awful. I can still enjoy many things if I don't have a child and I can't partake in motherhood. Okay, I can accept myself as a fallible human being. Now, the reason why this one's important, we haven't talked about this. Let's say someone took a lot of drugs in their life and they're recovering from an addiction, and or they were an alcoholic, and or they did a bunch of other things that were problematic, and maybe they were in extreme sports and they got a bunch of fractures, or maybe they have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or maybe they have other type of endometriosis, and then they berate themselves. All that will come into it too. There's a lot of angles in this particular fear cycle. And that equals your new emotional consequence. You'll still be sad. You'll still be upset. You might cry every once in a while. That's not the unhealthy component. It's the chronicity of the depression and the shame and the guilt that becomes a problem. Now, the second piece of this video will be if you do have a child, okay? So now let's move into you have a child and you have all the health-related fears surrounding it. What if I feed them too much? What if they die in their sleep? What if I'm the cause of their death? What if I die from a car accident and I can't here to take care of them? That would be terrible. What if they get depressed when they get older? It's all really fear, but there's different facets of it. It's like the top pyramid is fear of loss and control, and then there's all these other issues that will need to be worked on, which lead back up to fear of not having the life you want, fear of being a bad person, etc., loss of control. So, and then the other aspect of that is the fear of losing control and potentially being the person that harms a family member. It doesn't just have to be your child. I've seen this with brothers, sisters, people they live with, best friends, pets, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, roommates, etc., etc. So there's a lot of compulsions present when the person has a fear of harming their child in a health-related way. They're meticulously making sure they're washing their hands so they're not dirtying food. They're reading numerous amounts of articles talking about how to be a good mother and how to not make mistakes, prepping things, formula bottles, perfect strollers, perfect safety seats in the car, etc., etc. None of these are inherently bad. The balance around them is the problem. So if you're compulsively searching for the safety because you have the moral fears and the responsibility OCD is completely jacked up, you have to look at the behaviors you're engaging in in order to break that down, which you can do. So I always tell people, like when you're doing your homework, okay, when you're actually writing it on paper, let's use these particular things, okay? So what you're going to want to do is, this is something I think is really key, and I do this with a lot of people in my sessions. So you'll have behaviors, okay? Then you'll have beliefs, okay? And then you'll basically have some sort of a plan. So you'll have behaviors, beliefs, and a plan. It doesn't look like this. Anyone who does, I'll show you what some of them will look like. Let me just block out a name here. I'll just take this piece off so you guys can kind of see. Okay, there's no name on this. So this is kind of how my sheets look like. So you have kind of backgrounds. This one was, since we spoke last, and then homework. This person didn't have a whole lot of homework besides continuing being around their boyfriend because of fears of being sick and then throwing up, and then finishing book 1. So this will look different. Sometimes it's 1 page, sometimes it's 2 pages. If it's the first call, it could be 1 or 2 pages back and front. So it really depends on the person and what's going on. So you have behaviors when we go over those behaviors. So let's say for this one, they're compulsively looking at safety behaviors. Okay. They're compulsively Googling. Okay. And they're venting. And they have a lot of avoidance behaviors. Okay. So once we look at that and we have those written down, we transfer those over into the plan. And that's where we set up our actual exposures and our behavioral changes. Then we look at the beliefs. So this one would be the fear of losing control, right? Losing control. And then just the fear component of potentially being a bad mother. So that's where this comes in, where this book comes in. And then the third book, which is upstairs on my shelf, The Myth of Self-Esteem. Now, if you're looking for our books, OCDrecovery.com, underneath our resource tab, you can go in there, break those down, read those. If you're not coming in for coaching, read them in order. Sometimes when we work with people, if they come in with panic disorder, I might have them read book 1, then Claire Weeks' book 2, and then jump to book 5, which is self-help, which is That Last of Life by Paul David. So your behaviors will need to change. It's very important. I say this on all my calls. Your behaviors instill your beliefs. It's something to be very, very mindful of. If you're still engaging in compulsive behaviors, your beliefs aren't really going to shift because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to change those things. I know it's really hard to do. The other thing I want to highlight about the fear of losing control, the health-related fears, these fears are not going to go away in a day, a month, or even probably 6 months. You can make a lot of progress in 6 months, but sometimes these really moral-driven fears that have strong societal clamps can last for 2, 3, 4 years. You're not going to be chronically suffering that entire time, but they could come back and you'll probably have a good amount of relapses. And then that's where you have a structured plan, but that structured plan needs balance. If it's held too meticulously and too rigid, that becomes a problem in of itself. So those are the main things I wanted to cover in this video. I'll probably do another video where I go a little bit more into depth into the specific fear of losing control. But it's always important to remind yourself that the main takeaways from the video are the behaviors that you're doing are instilling your beliefs, whether you're working on your beliefs or not. The beliefs will need to be written down and broken down on paper, especially in the beginning. Having a good understanding of the books on the reading list is key. Learning how to not vent. Talk about your reassurance with your partner. A lot of the carryovers of the venting, reassurance seeking from our OCD turns over into these related fears too, because your spouse, boyfriend, husband, the person you're trying having a baby with, whoever you're in a relationship with, whether you're adopting or not, that person is going to be the person you're most likely going to vent and reassure to. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think about this. Comment down below. Again, if you're suffering with these related fears, please email us at info@ocdrecovery.com and we can get back to you in a timely fashion. Have a good one, everyone.